Yokoso to my kimono upcycling channel. This is part 2 of a project I'm working on for a client in the United States who asked me to upcycle her 100-year-old family heirloom kimono obi belt. In part 1, I showed you how I dismantle the obi and turn it into one full piece of fabric. If you haven't seen that video yet, I'd recommend watching it first as I go into detail about client's story, the history of behind the kimono, and the meaning of its beautiful design. In part 2, I'll be cutting the fabric, sewing the ordered items, and finally, while showcasing the newly transformed family heirloom, I'll reveal how much my customer paid for this project. At the end of the last video, I hung the obi up and left it for a few days to air out. This is an important step because kimono obi fabric is hand-loomed and often hand-embroidered, meaning it can hold moisture. Even though I ironed it to sanitize and reduce odors, the fabric still had a strong smell, so I did my best to freshen it up naturally. While the obi was airing out, I wasn't just sitting around. I reviewed my client's order and made sure I had enough extra materials, tools, and threads to complete the project. Here's the list of items she ordered: 4 haoris, 3 lunch bags, 1 handbag, 3 headbands, 4 scrunchies, 4 pendants, and 1 bangle. She also mentioned she might like a corset if he had enough fabric left. I worked out how much fabric each item would need and planned how best to use the material. Now, I didn't dive straight into cutting the fabric like you might see in short video on Instagram. I always take extra care to decide which parts of the obi's pattern should go where, marking everything to avoid mistakes. This particular obi has 2 prominent motifs as we reviewed in part 1, cranes and pavilions. I wanted to ensure each item featured one of these designs. For the haoris, I needed 10 cm wide by 150 cm long strips of fabric for the colors. I made sure to cut these so that each haori had one complete motif piecing 3 sections together as needed. Of course, I avoided chopping through the beautiful crane, one of the obi's standout designs. Next, I marked fabric for the headbands and scrunchies. For scrunchies, the fabric naturally becomes scattered and wrinkled. I deliberately chose sections like edges or areas with markings that wouldn't impact the final look. This way, I made the most of every piece of fabric. Then I moved on to marking the pieces for the bags. My bag designs usually have 2 distinct sides, so I placed the crane on one side and the pavilion on the other. For the handbag, I used a pattern carefully marking the fabric to follow its shape. To draw the circular parts, I used this little tool, a scale, which was given from my mother-in-law. It's a lovely heirloom that belonged to her mother, and I was also given some threads she used to sew clothes for her children, one of whom is now my husband. It's so special knowing that these tools and threads have been passed down through generations. As you might have noticed, most of the pieces I marked are rectangular and square. This approach not only preserves the large buttons on the kimono obi but also helps reduce waste. I always aim to use vintage and second-hand fabrics efficiently, and this kind of upcycling aligns beautifully with my ethos. I still need to cut the fabric for the pendants and bangle, but those can be made from smaller scraps, so I've set that aside for now. So here's the full picture of the marked fabric. These sections are for the haoris, these are for the headbands and scrunchies, and these are for the lunchbox. The last section is for the handbag. Marking the fabric is one of the most challenging parts of the process. It's so much more than just cutting. I spent hours carefully planning and marking to make sure every piece would turn out beautifully. After marking everything, I began cutting the fabric. I often receive comments like, I cried, or it hurts to see you cut fabrics, as if I'm destroying the history. And honestly, I understand those feelings because I used to think the same way. But the reality is, many kimonos end up in landfills after being worn just once or twice. Even though a brand new kimono can cost nearly 10k, most of the kimonos I buy were listed online or at local recycle shops for as little as £10 or £20 or even less. If I hadn't bought these hobbies and started these kind of projects, they likely would have been thrown away. While I appreciate those heartfelt comments, I also see them as an opportunity to raise awareness about the sheer number of kimonos being discarded and how we can breathe new life into these beautiful pieces. In the next part, I'll be showing you the creation process. This won't be a tutorial, as that would make the video far too long. Instead, I'll be making separate tutorial videos. So if there is a particular item you'd like me to demonstrate, let me know in the comments. I started with the bags as the zipper was one of the trickiest parts, so I wanted to tackle that first. The idea for these bags actually came to me during my first trade show at the Hampton Court Foods Festival last summer, since the event required traders to sell food-related items. My initial plan was to sell table runners, teapot cozies, and placemats. Then my husband suggested, what about grocery bags? That idea actually ended up being a huge success. Even better, I gave customers the option to choose an hobby from my collection and have a bag custom made, which they absolutely loved. It also worked well for me as I didn't have to create stock without knowing if it would sell. Next, I worked on scrunchies and headbands. To be honest, making scrunchies out of kimono obi fabric isn't the best idea for a maker's perspective. The fabric is thick and sturdy, which makes it incredibly difficult to turn it inside out. The first time I attempted it, it took me a good 30 minutes just to flip one. This time, I made the fabric strip a little wider, which made things easier, but it's still not the most practical material for scrunchies. After that, I moved on to the haoris. My haoris have a simple rectangular shape, which makes them easy to sew and fold into a compact size, perfect for carrying. For this order, I made 4 haoris using heavy way black cotton as my client's order. And for the first time ever, I seriously felt the need for a more durable industrial sewing machine. If you're a hobby sewist, a domestic machine like mine is absolutely fine. But as my business grows and I find myself making nearly 100 items, including bags, haoris, within a week or two before another drop, I can see how investing in a proper machine would really help with productivity. I actually had a quick look online, and Juki, a Japanese sewing machine brand, seems to have the best quality. If any of you have been through this thought process or already own an industrial machine, please leave a comment with your recommendations. With the leftover fabric scraps, I made bangles and pendants. These bangles, which I've sold nearly 100 of online and at my market stall, are one of my original designs. I wanted to create a small kimono accessory that people could easily buy, but for example, earrings were too tiny to properly showcase the fabric's patterns. So, after a lot of research and trial and error, I came up with these bangles. The concept is quite simple, but they've been really popular. The same goes for the pendants. Though I haven't sold as many, I personally love the design. For this order, the client requested that each pendant include an initial. Once I'd completed the initial order, I got back in touch with my client to discuss what else we could make with the remaining fabric. I assumed she'd order a corset, but instead, she asked if I could make a noren, a traditional Japanese fabric divider using 3 pieces of TOB. She wanted to hang it in the bedroom, in the same spot where they used to display the obi. So I did some research and experimented beforehand, then worked with her fabric. With the small leftover pieces, she requested glasses cases and magnetic bookmarks to be made from any remaining fabric. This magnetic bookmark originally came about from a request by my Instagram followers. For my last online drop before Christmas, I asked on my Instagram story what kind of kimono items they'd like to give as gifts, and one of the responses was a magnetic bookmark. I'd never thought about it before, but then I received another request from a lady, so I decided to give it a try. I did some research to see how other brands make them and what size would work best with kimono fabric. I also realized I needed to allow space for the magnets to be properly secured. After testing several designs, it turned out to be a huge success. Since it's a gender-neutral item doesn't require a large piece of fabric and is quick to make, it became a perfect, affordable unisex gift. So, for this project, by piecing together leftover fabric, I managed to create one sunglasses case and 4 magnetic bookmarks. I genuinely had no fabric left after this. So here's what I made. 3 lunch bags, 1 handbag, 1 sunglasses case, 4 howlies, 3 headbands, 4 scrunchies, 4 pendants, 1 bangle, 4 magnetic bookmarks, and 1 novel. This just shows how much you can create from a single 4-meter kimono obi belt. It took me about 7 days to complete the order, including filming, and my clients paid $2,000 for my skill and time. Do you think the work was worth it? Let me know in the comments. See you in the next video. またね!